Welcome to the Being Real podcast. And this week we have an international guest, somebody that I've been fortunate enough to do some work with, and is doing some really innovative stuff in this space. And she's absolutely mad on psych health and safety, which is very good. And so it's good to have someone who can bounce ideas off. So if my guests would introduce themselves, over to you.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Treena Reilkoff, and I am the owner CEO of TLR Solutions for Conflict. And
Okay. Well, let's discuss what TLR Solutions for Conflict does, and how we ended up working together.
what does TLR Solutions do? Well, I liked how you framed mad about psych health and safety. My background is, I guess, unique in the sense that I started off my career early age working in psychiatric institutions as a nurse's aide in my early teens and 20s for high school and university. So, what TLR Solutions does, we're a conflict ADR practitioner, conflict resolution management, with a lens and focus of integrating well-being, mental health, psychological health and safety, resilient risk mitigation, suicide prevention, and trauma informed all into one because we're human and you can't separate those.
No. And for the audience, could you describe what ADR is? What does the title stand for?
Yes, ADR is alternative dispute resolution. So it's a continuum of conflict management that begins with facilitation when there's a conflict, in the neighborhood, community, workplace, organizations, financial, any conflict. It's around the world. So it's a continuum where it looks to how do we resolve conflict at the lowest level and have people involved. So my kind of areas in the ADR continuum, because it starts with just, conversations between people that they self-initiate to where it can go to a facilitation. So where I help facilitate a conversation to a more structured form, which is a trauma-informed mediation, where I integrate ensuring that the parties are psychologically safe, both physically and mentally in the process. It can then lead to, if that does not resolve, it goes up the continuum into negotiations, arbitrations, and eventually litigation if there is no opportunity for the parties to resolve it, and them being the solutions to their own conflict.
And do you have to be a lawyer to do this?
No, ADR is a profession, it's a skill based. So, yes, there are many lawyers that incorporate ADR mediation as the continuum ends up with litigation if all the other opportunities do not work. But in the profession itself, you do not have to be a lawyer. So I'm a non-lawyer ADR professional, and I'm also part of the ADR Institute of Ontario as on the board of directors, and also a member and part of the ADR Institute of Canada. And what that means when we kind of look at conflict resolution in the ADR process, with my history and background in education, my degrees in social work, crim psych, ADR and conflict resolution are actual skill sets that have developed and advanced into now professions. So every profession can have a specialty and become an ADR professional.
So you didn't just sort of get up one morning when you were 18 and think, I want to become an ADR specialist. Has your life's journey and work brought you to where you are now? I'd be interested to know
Yeah. Well,
how did Treena become this ADR like practitioner? How did that happen?
again, a background in mental health, social work, public safety in federal and provincial. So I've always worked in high-risk, complex environments with persons who are experiencing a lot of conflict. And when I've lived in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and as my journey took me to Ontario, I was thinking about going back to school again for my third degree. And I was looking into going into family law, having lived through divorce and self-represented and understand it. And having been a prior counselor in the community, hospitals, federal penitentiaries, I understand that mental health component when you're dealing with conflict. And I have a cousin and a sister-in-law who are both lawyers, and it is both their third degrees as well. And we had a discussion about what is the benefit of me going into law school when my focus was on conflict resolution and mediation. And that's kind of where I pivoted and went and got executive certification in conflict management, which
Okay.
then I kind of supplemented with another grad cert in risk mitigation. Because in my mind and in my experience in the topic of resilience, resilience is risk mitigation, whether it's personal, professional, organizational, operational, financial, or environmental, and conflict is risk.
I was really hoping you'd go beyond the individual on resilience. So thank you for that. Otherwise, that might have been another talking point. Um, I guess knowing you, I would describe you as psych health and safety. Um, like a, I don't know, how would you describe you? I think your thirst for psych health and safety knowledge is quite, quite inspirational to see that. And so we had a unique opportunity, did we not, last year?
Yes,
Maybe you
we
can tell
did.
the listeners about that, please.
Sure. So how me and Peter first met was Australia in Sydney and Flourish held the first ever Psych Health and Safety Conference. And I was not miss being a part of that world-changing event. And that's kind of where me and Peter connected and with a bunch of other amazing professionals. And so in the next year came about being, I'm a part of the ADR Institute of Ontario in Canada, an opportunity. They were holding their national conference, ADR conference in here, Toronto, and it was the anniversary of ADR Canada's 50th year in ADR and having their conference. So I presented an idea to Peter. I said, hey, how about we co-facilitate and introduce the importance of psych health and safety into the ADR continuum, but not also what psych health and safety was. Let's introduce how mental health, mental well-being, risk, and neurodivergence all aligns with how when you show up to be an ADR professional, you can't not integrate those parts of being human and resolving conflict. So in the
Hmm.
2024 ADR Institute of Canada's conference, me and Peter got to co-facilitate some training on a national level.
We did, and are we going to talk to them about the pen and the glove
Yes.
experience, just to emphasize? I think it's interesting because um, many people come into work environments, and particularly work environments of high pressure, with certain biases, don't they? Um,
Yeah.
and this is a really useful illustration, I think. Hopefully, we'll do it justice, but perhaps you
Yeah,
can explain the outcome of what we got people to do as well.
for sure. So when I like to facilitate workshops, training, or even attend, I don't want to just be educated. I want to be able to walk away with an experience, a lived experience, or some skill set development, upskilling. So what me and Peter decided to do, knowing that in Canada, the Accessibility Act has just been launched, and neurodivergence, which is an umbrella for many different diagnoses, are invisible disabilities, which impact how you show up at work, which contribute to potential conflict at work in the workplace. And a lot of people don't understand it. So we decided we started off our workshop with a lived experience. And what that lived experience looked like was everybody was going to have a spelling test. And in participating in the spelling test, you had to write with your non-dominant hand, and we gave everybody a rubber glove, plastic glove, to put on their non-dominant hand to experience sensory differences. We also played some white noise in the background to have some sensory auditory influence. And then I gave a 5-word spelling test. But the interesting part of the spelling test, and it was just a regular spelling test that we would all take, in junior high, middle school, high school, was that you had to receive 85% for a pass on your penmanship. And if you did not receive that pass, you would potentially lose your job. You would no longer have any opportunities for growth or advancement in your company. And you might have to go for some remedial training because you were not meeting the bar of the expectation of this workplace. So you're writing the spelling test with your non-dominant hand, a rubber glove on it, background noise to distract you, and you need to have 85% pass. So we created that environment of immediate stress, crisis, fear, threat, to get that baseline of what people are exposed to when under conflict or have experiences of invisible and visible disabilities. And we come in with our biases, not understanding there is no baseline because we're all unique. And I'll let Peter kind of finish off the experience of what we shared with the group that he personally shared, which I give him kudos because to have that courage, transparency shows that strength does come from when you are vulnerable and you can acknowledge your biases.
Yeah, I mean, there was a large proportion of the group were able to achieve the task. Their writing was a little bit skew with. However, in this beautiful dyslexic brain of mine, and with my ADHD running it along the sidelines, I was only able to get 2 words, and they didn't look anything like the words that should have been there. And then people were so I shared that, and it was interesting because people were actually shocked. They were like, they're trying to rationalize how does that sort of happen? And I said, so here I am as a presenter, but I have hidden disabilities. But here's the thing for me: when I go into an environment which is heavily on writing and is super busy, then that impacts my sort of performance. But and it opened up a fascinating conversation about hidden biases that we have. We assume everyone's like us, and also what happens though if you've got a client in front of you who has these issues. That do you consider actually should we give them a series of forms for them to write? Or actually, might that induce anxiety, or should uh, compromises be made for them? So instead of doing it in a very busy and loud room, perhaps a quieter room. But unless you're actually assessing what the requirements are of the person in front of you, then you're very unlikely to pick those up. But that really did start a long conversation, didn't it, with the people there going, oh my God, I've never really thought that the way I do might be a source of conflict. The way I do things may cause conflict and may cause, make it, yeah. Would that be a good illustration?
Oh, for sure. And it kind of expands on too now with the whole concept of, people not understand the difference between psychological safety, which is kind of Amy Edmondson of being in that safe place to speak up without reprimand or a negative response, versus psychological health and safety, which is different in different countries, but it's about risk mitigation and identifying hazards and the risks and mitigating it so people are not negatively impacted by their mental health and having psychological injury or harm. So here in Canada, because we now have provincial legislation and federal legislation on workplace violence and harassment, understanding what you need when you go in for those investigation interviews, which I also do as well under OSH, and I've done in the workplace and in communities, is when you go in as that investigator or as that mediator and you're addressing conflict, are you checking your own biases first at the door before you enter? Do you set up the environment so it's psychologically safe and psychologically healthy and safe for all parties presenting? Do you inquire, do they need any accommodations? Because invisible disabilities, unless somebody feels safe to share, they're not going to share with you. And we just
And
assume.
yeah, and it's a unique uptake on psych health and safety, is it not? Um, I've over the course of the last 25 years seen the whole concept of psych health and safety um, morph and grow and then morph again. And I know when we had a conversation at the conference, one thing that particularly stuck in my mind was the fact that this actually could impact all realms of work that we do in psych health and safety, and that the neurodiversity uh, issues that are there are as much part of managing people's psychological health and safety. And interestingly enough, they're covered by various bits of legislation, are they not? So in
Mhm.
Canada, in the UK, the Equality Act. Where we have to make reasonable adjustments for people. But actually, those reasonable adjustments mean that what you're doing is creating a situation where people can't be at their best, in those exam situations or
Yeah,
interviews, etc. It's something to think about.
yeah.
Now, you're a prolific um, LinkedIner in terms of your information on mental health and on prevention. And I'm interested to know how it how and why does it just absolutely tick your box? I think that's probably a good description, isn't it? It's more
Oh,
than
yeah.
just the experience. There's something there that goes, okay, this just makes sense.
Yeah. So I have those eureka moments that just make sense. And those are my posts on LinkedIn. And my passion behind those posts kind of reflecting on the impact of COVID and the world, because my background is clinical. So trauma informed is a universal precaution in my lens and how we mitigate risk. And COVID changed the dynamics of our present time. Right now is the only time where there's 5 generations in the workforce. And if we don't create a trauma-informed psychological health and safe workplace and environment and society and communities, we are going to impact and affect negatively the next 7 generations. So there was a gap where the young generations were basically, I call it, on house arrest. They were not exposed to conflict and adversity and risk because we were all mandated to stay in our houses for COVID. So kids lost years of lived experiences of developmental, emotional, cognitive maturity and growth. So now's our time to make that intergenerational contribution of a legacy for our future generations. And that starts with integrating psychological health and safety, trauma informed, understanding what is neurodivergence and how we show up, because really everybody wants to show up and do their best and be their best. But you need supports and you need to have environments that keep you safe and have that ability to ask for that support. And what's kind of exciting that just was it yesterday launched was that,
It was indeed, yes.
yeah, in when we're looking at psych health and safety, how I like to explain hazards and risks so that everybody can understand it is that in physical risk and occupational health and safety, businesses, organizations have to mitigate for physical risk. So here in Canada, it snows, sleet. So if it's snowing out and you have your front door, the hazard is ice, the risk is slip and fall. The organization or employer is legally responsible to create that safe entrance to mitigate any slip and fall injury. That slip and fall injury can be a slip with no injury. It could be a twist, a break, but that fall can also be a death. Because if somebody hits their head from that slip, it could result in death. So that is a broad continuum of the importance of mitigating risk in a physical sense. When you look at psychological health and safety in the workplace, the hazards, some of them are workload, work demand. So this is where we're looking at systems. Policies, processes are written, but it doesn't ensure behavior or performance competencies of what it looks like and feels like. So if the hazards are work demand, workload, leadership that is differing of communication, so there's not clear, concise, and equitable fairness in communication and opportunities, those are hazards. The risk is workplace violence, harassment, bullying. What are the potential outcomes? Well, it's, low engagement, there's retention issues, there's stress leave, there's disability. It could then result in psychological harm or injury, so mental health diagnoses, which then increase the costs of leave and all the other factors that are involved in the cost of conflict. But then, just like a slip and fall of death, an unhealthy workplace can result in suicide. And yesterday, and I'm proud to say Peter is not only a peer, but my friend, he was a part of creating and launching the BSI free guide of suicide in the workplace that was just launched yesterday. So maybe
BSI 30450.
30450. So maybe you could share a little bit about how that free resource around the world is now another part of integrating and mitigating psychological health and safety risk in our workplaces.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, so I was approached last year to convene the drafting panel for the first standard on suicide prevention and education. Uh, Actually, in standards world, this has never been done before, so we're breaking ground here. But here's the thing: over the course of the last 5 years, we've seen a massive increase, and I use the word massive increase in suicide rates. Globally, that does equate to 12%. But last year alone in the UK, there were 7,000 suicides that had occurred, and that is up from 4,000 less than 5 years ago. So we are sitting at the edge of an increase in suicide. And interestingly enough, the suicides occurring in younger people used to always be 40 to 55, and now we're seeing suicides, but statistically between 25 and 65. And so we were approached to bring together a group of experts, lived experience, and other interested parties from the charity world, to put together a guide that a person could have a look at when. So you're in HR, you've never had any experience of death, or you've never had an experience of suicide, and suddenly it's 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. What do you do? So what we tried to do is create a guide that would help people in HR, in health and safety, line managers, to about the things that they could do should an incident occur. But more so, the important thing is also that we looked at how do you put prevention mechanisms in place. So once you have a concern, what do you do? Once to displace some of these myths that that you shouldn't talk about with the person about are they having suicidal thoughts or ideation. There's a number of myth busting elements to it. There's some process, there's some procedures, there's a range of tools that are in the appendix. The bulk of the standard is only 32 pages long, and then the appendix has all the really interesting stuff that you can dive into. But the core element of the standard is taking people through different clauses and different, very similar to ISO 45003, aligned sort of with ISO 45003 as well. So by doing that, we equip people to have conversations with people who present as experiencing ideation. We know ideation doesn't lead to the act of suicide. And actually, simple conversations where someone says, "I'm just not feeling it. I'm like really depressed. I'm crying all the time." It allows a conversation to be had with people, but more importantly, it gets the organisation to do what the processes and procedures that they should be putting in place, and it identify what the risks are, and also the behaviours to look out for, and what you should do there. And it was an incredible privilege to have sat with over 20 people on the drafting panel, and then to have got the guy to have gone for public consultation, and to have come back and to work through. But it's designed so that somebody who's not really had that much experience in this area can pick it up and go, "What do I do?" And this is what we want. Often people don't know, what do you do? So for example, the instance where someone had died by suicide, and you stop their salary immediately, and it's like, no, you can't do that because it's an unexpected death. So actually, it's best to show support for a couple of months, so that actually that allows people to get through through the process. I mean, that's obviously the other, one end. The other end is actually, if you're doing workplace mental health um, projects or initiatives, incorporate these about having conversations with people. We must remember that until the act of suicide happens, there are multiple avenues where we can look to try and prevent. So I think we were trying to really emphasize that you can make a difference. So yeah, it's a fascinating project. And I'll be honest, I mean, those who watch this podcast, um, this for me is up there with when we did the management standards and ISO 45003. I just feel it's interconnecting now. So
Mhm.
we had the risk assessment management standard, we had the management system ISO 45003, and now we have a standard for suicide, which is one outcome of poorly managed in workplaces where stress or depression and anxiety are present. Obviously, I'm not saying that everyone who experiences depression and anxiety will go along that. I'm saying there are some times when actually we know from coroner's reports and that work was a contributing factor.
Yeah.
And actually, if we could uncontribute it would be marvelous.
Right. And
There you
it's
go.
kind of interesting too, because this so aligns, and I was excited to share. I did some training for a law firm yesterday on trauma informed, but when I did the trauma informed, it was under the lens of becoming trauma informed begins first with yourself, to understand yourself, to mitigate vicarious secondary trauma when you're in that high risk profession and you're exposed to a lot of high risk conflict and sometimes not really nice files, especially in the workplace violence and harassment that is more and more increasing. So in the facilitation of the training, it was helping create that protective safety net as a professional in the legal profession. Because when you can understand and identify your own stress and trauma responses, which mirror each other, then you have the ability to set up a more psychologically safe environment for your clients, and in preparation of going to mediation, negotiation, discovery, or potential litigation. And so we introduced and I brought conversation up and just kind of inquired, have you ever asked somebody, one of your clients, you get that gut feeling by what they're saying, but have you ever asked anybody, are you having thoughts of harming yourself? And all of them, it was like a pause and a stop and a reflection. And I kind of call it, when you go from SOS to SR, self-reflection strengthens resiliency. Until we self-reflect, we might not get those aha moments. And it came back, well, we're not trained in suicide. And that's where you don't have to be trained officially in suicide. And this new standard is an opportunity for create intergenerational legacy of how ideation are those thoughts. It doesn't mean you will commit suicide. It means you're having thoughts that you just don't want to be around. And life is really overwhelming right now. It's that lowest level, just like having that lowest level of a facilitated discussion and conflict. And then it goes to mediation.
Mm.
So it's not to be fear, like fear of conflict. Become conflict curious. Don't be fearful of the word suicide or suicide ideation. Become curious because we're human and we all respond in different ways to conflict and risk. And in just a kind of plug out to another guru, Dr. Gav Schneider and his Presilience, which I just finished my grad cert in.
Another
Presilience is
another
about,
certificate.
yeah, another certificate. I'm a lifelong learner, but it's about resilient. You don't want to just bounce back. You want to bounce forward and you want to be prepared, adaptable, and have not only your mind, but your body ready to pull out of your back pocket those decisions and what you might encounter. So you're mitigating your own risk when you show up for those high, intense conversations, environments, or crises that occur, because there's always the next time.
Yeah. And that's interesting, isn't it? Many people, and even you without even thinking, use the word commit. And actually, so the act of suicide.
Yeah. See,
So
it's the
but
change of language.
it's a really
Language
good
is important.
illustration
Yeah.
because we are both involved in that,
Yeah.
and that's just a classical example of language, how it
Yeah.
comes into us, and then without even thinking, yeah. And
And I
I
just
mean,
said it.
yeah,
Right? And that's what's kind of actually, and I'm glad you brought that up because part of that grad cert and biases come from when we're functioning on our system one thinking, our subconscious, where most of our everyday life and work is the 80%. It's that 20% of system two thinking, and I believe it's Daniel Kahn. Don't, and I
that's right.
apologize if I got that wrong, but it was in my grad cert, right? It's that system two thinking, that 20% where you have to be more present, more aware in how you speak, the language you used, right? So again, my subconscious historical of over, 25 plus years in mental health, I used the wrong terminology because we are advancing in safe, inclusive language.
Yeah.
So thank you
And
for that,
what's
Peter.
no, but it's just a useful illustration of how easy it is to fall into. I have said that. I remember I said it actually act in the middle of one of our drafting panels, and I went, "Oops!" But
Yeah.
it sort of it does happen. I think it's you are an inspiration for I get most of my new information comes off one of your posts, or you drop me an email and look at this, look at this. So it's nice to have given you something something new to look at. But I'm in developing the standard. We really did look at the whole language stuff, and actually, what do you do when a suicide occurs? What do you do when there's ideation? And we, I said, and then those on the drafting committee, I said, my mother's got to understand this. If my mum understands it, then we're okay.
Yeah.
Because actually, we bring language that's actually alienating into our conversations because without thinking, because we've done a couple of degrees and everything else. Well, even if we've not done the degrees, it's what are all these? Like I said to you, what does ADR mean? What does it actually mean? What's this? So I think it's yeah. So it is it's fascinating, and yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Before you run away, you've got, if you were to have a younger self, what would you be, and that younger self is now, what would you tell that younger self in terms of your journey in this area?
I would tell my younger self to get a journal and track all life experiences that have, impacted who you are, but not just track the event, right? So when does a trauma happen? A critical incident happens, but it's how you manage, cope, and learn from it. If we don't document it and take that time to self-reflect when the hard stuff happens and recognize how did we get through it? How did we manage? How did we cope? How did we transform? How did we grow? How did we create that safety net, that support system? We're all human and there's no right or wrong. So embrace your journey of life and take all that hard stuff and turn it into your assets because that's what they are.
Oh, absolutely. And we both, all of us have had journeys which are, which have been impacted by experiences that have gone along, including our future experience. Begin to seek to make a masterclass on this if there's an interest. It is just a fascinating area where I think there's a great opportunity to teach people to think about their internal biases and how that actually is connecting with and impacting on other
Yeah.
psychological health and
Can
safety.
I just share a quick story of, we talk biases. Do we have time for my
Mm.
quick story?
You've got 40 seconds.
40-second quick story. Had a major surgery. I thought I was really inclusive when it came to disability, both physical and invisible, until I had and still have a temporary disability, which has made me have to change how I live life daily and become more methodical and mindful. But I had biases against the word cane, because to me, that was ageism. That was, I am not worthy enough. So even the self-talk we use, I call it a dancing stick. So even the self-talk we use, we don't realize the depth and the ingrained biases we have until we're exposed to them. So take that time to self-reflect, because that's where real
Yeah.
true growth comes.
No, absolutely, and it's not just that American fuzzy thing. It's actually quite important as we go along. So thank you very much for coming on and for sharing your story. And for our listeners, you'll be able to find this recording on Spotify and on YouTube if you want to have a look at us at the same time as you're listening. Yeah, reach out to us on LinkedIn. So that's Peter Kelly and Treena Reilkoff, and if you're following my LinkedIn, you'll find Treena on there. I tend to uh, pass on her so she puts a LinkedIn story, and then I share it. Because I suddenly feel old. I couldn't remember what the term was. Pass it on. But yeah, so thank you so much, and
It was a
I'll say
pleasure.
goodbye. Thank you. So it's
I'll
goodbye
see
from
you
the Being
soon.
Real podcast, and goodbye to Treena in Canada.
Thanks, Peter.
You are welcome. Thank you again.